Hello, everyone. Ooh, loud. Welcome back to Questions You Never Thought You Could Ask in Church. My name is Andrew Metcalf. I am the technical director at Fellowship of Faith, and I am joined here by Mr. Steve Wells.
I'm here.
And Mr. Pastor David Gadini.
Mr.
Hello,
Pastor.
everyone. Mr. Pastor. That's the new,
Yeah.
I like
You
that.
should get a doctorate, too.
It always struck
then
me
he
as
can do
pretentious
doctor.
when people go like the Reverend Doctor. You know, I mean, I know that's the official title, but it's just like, come on, really? You putting that in the name? I mean, man, props to your degrees and all, but
I prefer just Dave.
just Dave.
I have a bachelor's degree. Can I add that on
I think
somehow?
you should, yeah. Andrew Metcalf, B.A. Or is it a Bachelor of Science?
It's a Bachelor of Science.
Oh, so it's B.S. Andrew Metcalf, B.S.
Oh, yeah.
BS.
You
B.S.
I think there's a lot of truth to that.
I think so.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, this is the podcast where we invite you to text in any question you have on God, on theology, on religion, on the Bible, on Christianity, on Jesus, on how it intersects with life. We started this podcast years ago, actually as a sermon series that began in our church, where we invite people to come into our church on Sunday morning and text in a question anonymously on anything I just mentioned to you. And it took off. And I think it took off for this reason, and it's why we've continued doing this through today, is that a lot of people who are sitting in churches don't feel like they can ask the questions that they're really asking. They're embarrassed to ask them. They're ashamed to ask them. They think they're going to be judged if they ask them. They may be someone who's been a Christian for 40 years, and they feel stupid because they think the question is so simple that they should know it already, and people are going to look at them weird if they ask this and go, oh man, you should know that. Or other people who maybe don't come from a Christian background, don't consider themselves Christian, don't really know much about Christianity, and are like, man, all these people here are like, halos on their heads, and if I was to ask something like this, they're going to think I'm nuts. Hey, look, we're all in the same place. All of us have questions, crazy questions, weird questions, far out there questions, simple questions, complex questions, questions about everything from why do Christians believe what they believe? How do you deal with the hard teaching of Jesus? What's this strange passage of the Bible all about? I know that my mom used to tell me this, but it just doesn't feel right to me. So what do I do with that? If you've got them, this is the place that you can ask them. We welcome them, whatever they might be. Text them into 815-314-0363. Again, 815-314-0363. If you're joining us on 216 The Net, through Facebook, you can post your questions right there. If you're joining us on Fellowship of Faith's Facebook page, you can post your questions right there as well. Andrew's going to get them. We have an inbox of previous stuff going on. And before we jump in, I just want to comment that we've transitioned from skulls to ornamental pears and pumpkins here today. So
Very pretty.
That one's a grenade.
Very pretty.
So,
you pull it.
This one's the grenade. Literally a grenade.
So I shouldn't pull the pin on that one.
Well, it depends
All
how
right.
the show's going.
Depends how the show's going. Yeah,
That'd be a good way to sign off.
That's
All right, this is horrible. Pull the pin. Which is kind of so live stream, Facebook Live. We've got a comment. Dave is in a feisty mood. Ask your tough questions, and he probably won't hold back. Tina, I knew that just by his body language today.
Steve reads me. He knows my soul.
I do. And you know what's funny is that your body language reminds me a lot of our new kitten.
That's
Yeah,
right.
tell us about this new kitten that you weren't going to have,
So,
Steve,
well,
because
Yep. So I'm a
you-
loving father and husband. That's what I'm going to credit this to. And I'm compassionate.
keep telling yourself
Why does
that,
everybody
right?
laugh when I say that I'm compassionate? I am.
You were smiling as you said it. So
Are you sensitive and gentle of soul, Steve?
I really am, probably more than what people think, because I can come off as a little, I don't know, gruff sometimes, maybe
Okay.
a little
That's a good
insensitive.
there you go.
But I'm really caring and I love people because I'm called to. Doesn't mean I have to like them. I am called to love.
Isn't that the truth of the Christian faith?
Yes,
You know, why do we
yes,
die? I'm
yes.
doing this because I want to do it.
Yeah.
I'm called to do it, right?
So the cat, we rescued the cat. It was a little kitten.
Okay.
And it's black, it's Halloween, so we're still looking for a name. So if anybody has a creative name, it's all black but little white mittens. And no, I'm not going to name the kitten Mittens.
Mittens or boots.
Or boots or any of that stuff. So if you've got a cool name, let us know. But no, I'm actually falling in love with this cat.
I would call him unlucky.
Unlucky.
I mean, he's black, and you swore you weren't going to keep him.
Blue. Oh my gosh. Okay, Tina, you've been talking to Maya. That's such a
Call him.
That's a It's not a coincidence
Call
because you've
him,
been talking to my daughter. So
Call him Albino Foot. It's a good blues
Albino
name.
Foot.
Like mud
it really
foot?
rhymes.
Albino
Yeah, I
Foot.
mean, it rolls off the tongue very well.
Little Albino
It's
Foot.
a good yelling name, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, Albino
Anyway, the cat I was watching the news this morning, having a cup of coffee, and he just comes up and snuggles right.
So he's an indoor cat.
He is.
Oh, okay.
He is now.
Okay.
He is now, and already potty trained, litter box. Like,
So where'd you
goes.
get this thing? I thought it was like some feral cat roaming around
It
your
was a
neighborhood
feral
or something.
cat
Okay.
roaming around outside of our house,
Okay.
and so we have 2 tomcats around our neighborhood as well. And so our fear was that those cats would have just torn them apart.
Yeah.
Because territory. And so Barbie went and got a live trap, trapped the cat, brought him indoors. We were going to take him to like some rescue place. They weren't open when we wanted to go, and then it was 2 days later that they were open. And then I find my daughter and my wife in my wife's office hugging with tears because they knew that I was planning on taking the cat back. And I'm like, look, I am a very sensitive person. I love you too. I don't want to see you in any pain or sadness. I'm not saying that this is like a non-negotiable. So what I did is I said, go into the bedroom. You guys come up with your best case, write it all down, present your case to me, and then we'll go from there. And so we did. We wrote up a contract. We now know responsibilities, who's doing what, and it's all written in stone.
That's a vital thing to have. Otherwise, you're doing
it really
all.
is.
Yeah,
it really is.
Yeah, that was a good move.
So things are going well with the cat. I have to say that I'm enjoying it because it's a lot like me. I go do my thing.
A little gruff.
I'm independent. Sometimes I want affection. Sometimes I don't. I'll let you know by my body language. Right?
There you go.
So
there you go.
So that's why I see your. Is piss and vinegar? Is that a bad thing? Your body language said piss and vinegar this morning. Mm-hmm. So when Tina said Dave is in a feisty mood, that's what I mean by that. So let's ask some good, tough questions and get you riled up like the question is catnip.
I think I have a good one to start with.
All right, let her rip.
Under what grounds is remarriage permissible?
Oh, under what grounds is remarriage permissible?
Contract breaking? I don't know.
Right. Are you asking me?
I don't know.
Okay,
Both of you.
No, let's go with Dave.
Permissible for who?
That's all it says. Under what grounds is remarriage permissible? I'm assuming in situations of divorce or death.
Yeah, and here's the piss and vinegar for you, Steve, even though this really isn't the full board yet.
Okay.
The reason I'm kind of asking that back is because within 2,000 years of Christian history, there have been certain groups or certain callings that would not allow remarriage in certain cases that would be allowed for other people in other cases. Give you a case in point. And if our Orthodox brothers and sisters are listening out there, fact check me on this. But if I remember correctly and if I'm remembering this correctly, bishops or priests, if you will, in the Orthodox Church, like Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, who are allowed to marry, if their spouses die, are not allowed to remarry. Now, I'm not going to swear that that's still the case today, but there had been historical precedent for that type of thing. But I don't think that's the spirit of the question here today. I think the spirit of the question is, what is the biblical warrant for remarriage for the average, ordinary, everyday person? Is God's wishes and commands, if you can put it that way, apply to us all? Well, the Bible lists a few. If your spouse dies, you are free to remarry. You can read about that in Romans chapter 7. If your spouse has been unfaithful to you, sexually unfaithful to you, the Greek word is porneia, from where we get pornography from, but it shouldn't equate to pornography as you think about it. It's a broad category that goes beyond simply meaning adultery, though that would certainly be included. But if there's some kind of sexual immorality in your spouse, that, according to Jesus, would be grounds for divorce and remarriage. Specifically, you could read Matthew 19 or Matthew 20. The exact chapter is escaping me, but you'll find it quickly enough. Paul builds on this. And what Paul does in 1 Corinthians 7 is he adds another category on top of it. And it's very fascinating the way Paul puts it, because he says literally in the Bible, now this is coming from me. This isn't coming from the Lord. arguably meant to be Jesus there. So he's saying, look, I'm not carrying this teaching on from Jesus. I'm just trying to apply some practical wisdom as I see it from my understanding of the scriptures as a whole to this situation that's plagued people, well, in the last, not just today, but for the past 2,000 years. And he says, if a believing spouse is married to an unbelieving spouse, and that unbelieving spouse decides to leave, let him or her, that in that case you are also no longer bound. But what's fascinating, and therefore, meaning no longer bound to that marriage vow, and therefore free to remarry. Okay, just to make that explicit. What's fascinating about that case in 1 Corinthians 7 is Paul seems to just be attempting to bring practical wisdom to any number of scenarios that can happen in marriage today. Now, what some Christians have done is they've looked at these biblical exceptions to marriage, if you will, or these biblical allowances for divorce and remarriage, right? Specifically remarriage. And have said, it's just these three. It's if your spouse dies, it's if there's some kind of marital unfaithfulness and, sexual unfaithfulness or immorality in one way or another. And third, if there's what they would call desertion. And some have taken a conservative approach, if you will, and going, that's it. Others, however, have looked at what Paul has done in 1 Corinthians 7 and have taken a conceptual approach, going, the Bible is not trying to mandate every single instance when divorce and remarriage may be allowed. So we're going to follow not so much the word of Paul, but the pattern of Paul. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Which means there are, it would seem, other exceptions for remarriage that could still be God honoring, even beyond that narrow line, so to speak. Now, both of these have their merits. Both of these approaches have their dangers. Both of these approaches can be abused. Neither of these approaches is really practiced perfectly, whatever a doctrinal statement of faith might say in a church body or a church. There are exceptions to this, of course, but by and far. And so that's the starting point to the conversation. My personal beliefs is that in a day and age where divorce has become so frequent, the church, I believe, has become, in a spirit of grace and understanding, inadvertently also very permissive, in the sense that it's almost treated as no big deal anymore, and the words of Jesus really aren't held that seriously anymore. There's issues with this, because it becomes hypocritical that when you also look at other sexual struggles or sins, namely LGBT issues or homosexuality, why a rigid stance might be taken on one thing that's spoken about actually less in the Bible than something like divorce and remarriage. So there's issues with that there.
Yeah.
However, sometimes the rigidity of the other school also seems to be getting a little, shall we say, letter of the law rather than spirit of the law. There's this great article I read called "How to Exegete a Stop Sign." All right,
Okay.
and what it does,
Sounds good.
it's great, it's fantastic. What it does is it looks at different religious traditions and how they would interpret a stop sign. And the fundamentalist would come to the stop sign and he would stop and he would stay there until the stop sign tells him to go because it says stop.
Yeah.
Right? All communication has an interpretive edge to it. Likewise, they would talk about like your typical Lutheran and they'd say, I don't know, they just kind of look around and they see what everyone else is doing and everyone else seems to blow the stop sign, so they blow the stop sign too. Right?
Yeah.
Both are kind of missing the spirit of it. And so if you're in this place and you are maybe divorced or widowed and you're wondering what remarriage might look like for you in your context, what I would do is I would either suggest text back in specifically, and we can talk about that instance here on the show, or talk to your pastor. And if you don't have one, I encourage you, find one. one who's teaching the Word of God, one who's committed to the Word of God, one who is looking to do so with both sensitivity but also honesty. We're here at Fellowship of Faith in McHenry, Illinois. If you don't have any place to connect with, you can connect with us at fellowshipoffaith.org. But if you have that local church, I certainly encourage you to pursue that avenue as well. And don't leave this one to just guessing, if you will. Likewise, if you're in a situation where you are divorced and remarried, and you're wondering, am I honoring God in this? Maybe you still feel guilt about this, or shame about this, or doubt about this, which I find is far more frequent than you would think. And often people bring in a certain degree of what I would say poison into their new relationship because they haven't really resolved those feelings of guilt or doubt or shame, and they taint the new thing that has begun. Also talk to us or that person. We'd love to kind of help you steer it through it. But that should be enough to get you at least launched into the whole milieu of this.
The direction,
more.
Yeah, one thing I thought of when you were talking about that is, I mean, you mentioned how high the divorce rate is, and how we might not put enough emphasis on that as the church, with you're making a covenant with God and with the other person. But is that more of a symptom of not doing enough before marriage to, I don't know, discover each other, what, like premarital counseling, that type of thing? Hey, before you make this commitment, here's what it means, and here's how you should do it. I don't know. It seems like the divorce rate is so high, and is it just because people are getting married too quickly or without thinking about it, or what?
Here's a point of confusion I see that exists among a lot of people as well. The Bible makes a distinction between divorce and remarriage. We always talk about them as one and the same. And of course, you're not going to remarry unless you're divorced, because that's not our cultural way, and we don't live in a polygamous society, right?
Mm-hmm.
It would seem that the Bible, while certainly not encouraging divorce, going, God does not like divorce. Anyone who's been through a divorce knows firsthand how miserable and horrible of experience, and it's not God's intention, right? But it would seem that the Bible would allow divorce to occur in more circumstances than remarriage. Because remarriage automatically assumes having sex with someone who is not your first spouse. And there may be reasonable times and ways where you have to divorce another person. But just because that makes you free to remarry in the government's eyes doesn't make you necessarily free to remarry in God's eyes, even if it makes you free to remarry in a local church's eyes. And we all have this, I think, dirty tendency of going, well, what the government says is right and wrong must be what God says is right and wrong, so we've got to conform God's right and wrong to the government's. Well, no, the government has a far greater degree of freedom in certain areas where God would not, particularly in this area of divorce.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I do think, Andrew, to your point, I can speak to so many different circumstances and people and relationships to where they are focused on the day versus of marriage and everything that it's going to be that they've been dreaming about, since they were little and whatnot, and versus focusing on what comes the day after, what comes on the day after that, what comes the day after that, and what are those issues that you're going to run into, and have you even thought about that as a couple before even launching into this marriage? So, well, Dave knows this, but I'm certified in the SYMBIS, which is saving your marriage before it starts. And so with this, it really, you take as like I had Dave and Tina do it as individuals.
Yeah.
And they've been, how long you guys been married? 25
years. Yeah.
But still, it's still fun to take it and to see where you're at and where you line up, because it covers such a broad spectrum of things, from finances to love languages to you name it. And all that stuff is great to know before you're actually getting married, or even just after you're getting married, because it helps you know who that other person is and what their strengths are, and where maybe some of the conflicts are going to arise and how to resolve those conflicts. And so if you are pre-married, if you are just married, if you've been married for 25 years, my email address is swells@fellowshipoffaith.org. If you want to go through that, I'd be happy to go through it with you. It's fun, but it's also important. So real quick, just want to give a shout out. I see on our live page, Derek Johnson, my brother. Love this guy so much. He played He played drums for us when we were in Lincoln.
Oh,
And,
fantastic.
so I got to know Derek and Maria
Right.
and their boys and whatnot. So I hope you're doing well. This guy can cook barbecue like nobody's business.
All right, Derek, when are you coming to Chicago, man?
Please,
You
come.
know, come on.
please.
You play some
Please
drums
do.
on a
Yep.
Sunday.
Yeah,
We're
bust out
known
the
for
grills, we'll get
cookouts at our
smokers.
church.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, love to have you.
No, fantastic. Thanks for listening today, Derek. Glad to have you tuning in.
So,
Yeah, again, if you have questions, text them into 815-314-0363. Let's jump into a new one here. This came up, I think, at the end of last week's episode. We were talking about Martin Luther and the Reformation and all those things.
Yeah.
And this person states, thoughts on Martin Luther being anti-Semitic?
Yeah. Thoughts on Martin Luther being anti-Semitic. Martin Luther has written some of the harshest things you will ever read about the Jews. One of his later works before he died, forgive me if I'm missing the dates here by a year or two, but I believe Martin Luther died in 1546, and I believe in 1543 he published a work called On the Jews and Their Lies, which is kind of like almost a kill 'em all, like God sort 'em out kind of treatise. I mean, it's just like the rantings of a bitter old man, which in many ways Martin Luther seemed to become. It's fascinating because I want to talk about the charge of being anti-Semitic. And I also want to talk a little bit about some of the journey Martin Luther took himself as a person, as well as some of the nature of polemical writings of the day and age. You know, early on in Martin Luther's ministry, so to speak, Martin Luther was in love with Jews. He seemed very favorable to the Jews. He spoke very highly of the Jews and wrote very positively about the Jews. He learned Hebrew, in fact, and studied Hebrew from the influence of rabbinic traditions and rabbis and things like that, and seemed to almost operate with a certain sense that, wow, if the Jews were just presented with the clarity of the gospel, independent of all the junk that the church has brought into it, they would come and see how Jesus is the fulfillment of all that they covet, of all that they hold dear and love in the Torah, and see Jesus as the natural fulfillment. Well, that happened to certain degrees with certain ones, but not in a by and far movement. Now, that may contribute in part to Martin Luther's change of attitude later on. Things that Hitler himself used to his advantage during the Third Reich, pointing back to Martin Luther to kind of undergird his case for showing the Jews to be this awful race, or this feared race, or this race that needs to be kind of stamped out from our culture and existence. But I think it goes somewhere deeper than that. And here's the charge of anti-Semitism. It's certainly easy to charge Martin Luther as being an anti-Semite, but here's the problem. He speaks the exact same way about every single other people group that doesn't agree with him. Catholics, Anabaptists, Muslims, and people he just flat out doesn't like. All right? You can comb through Martin Luther's writings, and the same kind of invective that he brings towards the Jews, he speaks with the same, if not more, virile hatred, or at least how it would appear. And I'm not going to let him off the hook, all right, with how it would appear, but I'm going to circle back to that in a minute, with all these other groups as well. Yeah. So it doesn't seem so much that he's targeting one race or nationality out among all groups, as much as he's just man, if you're on the wrong side of him and you don't agree with him, it just comes rolling with the harshest, most, what we would call evil language, without trying to soft pedal it at all, that you could possibly imagine. And part and parcel, this was somewhat of the polemical writings that existed in the 15th century. It really changed later in the 16th and 17th century, maybe because of things like the 30-Year War and all the religious persecutions and people going, oh my gosh. But man, like you read the writings back then, and it's like sixth grade boys. I swear, just like, trying to up the ante on each other or something like that. One of my favorite is this thing called Against Hans Wurst. And Hans is like a common German name, like we would say John or something like that. and worst means sausage. So it's John Sausage. And it's not just kind of random. But like to call someone a Hans Worst would be kind of like calling someone a clown in this day and age, but a little bit, I think, more insulting.
Yeah.
And I forget who it was in particular. I had to look it up again. But there was this guy who was standing against him, one of the nobles or one of the princes, and he just writes this whole treatise called Against Hans Worst, which is against this local prince or theologian. And it basically ends with him saying, and I will quote Martin Luther in his exact language, I wish he would just shit in his pants and mold it into a sausage and gobble it up like the sausage-eating cow that he is.
Yeah.
That's how the guy wrote.
Yeah, we need more of that.
We need more of that. Yeah, we need more of that.
The thoughts expressed on this show are not.
Not necessarily the views.
And this is the stuff that gets sanitized out, and the stuff that when you go, whoa, that's in there, and somebody gets you wanting to read theology, you know?
But, I'll simplify it, maybe my take on it, where Martin Luther, right? Because I can picture him, a lot of his songs that he wrote was in the bars, right? They're drinking songs. They're in 6/8. Da, 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 da. You got your mugs in hand.
Yeah.
A mighty fortress.
He's like, picking up the bar.
So
tunes.
I see, I can just imagine and envision Martin Luther going into the pub. He got on his outfit to go out to the bars or the pubs or whatever. He goes there. He's in a jolly mood, because he's going to have a few beers. He gets a few beers in him and he starts singing, writing songs. Mighty fortress is our God, all these things. And then, that tipping point that you see people go through where it's like, okay, you should have stopped. You should have stopped after that last beer. He continues to go and he has maybe 3 or 4 more. And then he goes home and he gets angry and bitter and he starts writing these things. And then there's the outcome of what you're talking about. I don't know. I think that's more of what I would see on like a Lifetime series or something. Martin Luther.
One of the great...
They should produce that.
They honestly should. One of the great paradoxes or polarities that you'll see with Martin Luther is, on one hand, you have someone like Hitler using Martin Luther to his own devices for his own advantage and leveraging his writings to aid him in that kind of thing. On the other hand, you have someone like Martin Luther King, not Junior, but his dad, whose name was actually Michael, but changed his name to Martin Luther as opposed to Michael Luther because of the impact that Martin Luther and his writings had on him. So you have the grandfather of the civil rights movement on one hand, and you have Adolf Hitler on the other hand, both drawing from Martin Luther as a quote-unquote either inspiration or as an easy tool to their agenda. But regardless, I think it just kind of raises something important. We are unfortunate to be in a denomination that calls itself Lutheran, named after Luther, because it can lead you easily to think that means we espouse Martin Luther's teachings above all. Well, some of them. But the mistake that's made is that we're followers of Martin Luther and not Jesus. Mm-hmm. And anytime you're following a man other than Jesus, you're eventually going to get yourself into hot water. A woman as well. And so, Luther himself never wanted the Lutherans to be called Lutherans. He just wanted them to be called evangelical, which means people of the gospel, right? Not even so much as what evangelical has even come to mean in our day and age, but so just some insights on that as well. But
I can't wait
to
have conversations with him someday.
I think that'd be fun.
It would be fun.
You're going to leave either so mad, or you're going to have the best time of your life.
I think we'll probably wrestle.
I think that's going to happen too.
I'm going to wrestle Martin Luther.
You think he could drink you under the table, Steve?
I'm sure he could.
Yeah.
He's got a belly under that robe.
Yeah.
I think he got a beer gut.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But are you bringing your beer gut with you to?
I don't have a beer gut right now because I don't drink that much. So I do like to.
Didn't you used to be like 220? You said
203,
or something like that. 203.
203.
I cannot imagine you at 203. Like, what are you now? We're putting you on record.
Do you remember like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory? Right?
Yeah, the Blueberry Girl or something like that.
Yeah, when she blew up, but probably more looked like an Oompa Loompa.
Yeah, gotcha.
So
okay. Okay.
Because I did have red hair back then.
We got to get a picture of that and post it online.
Shame you into staying in shape.
We'll Photoshop like one of those striped overall things over.
I need one of those.
Halloween costume next year.
I already got it. I'm a year ahead. Sweet. No more Popeye.
Okay, let's move on to another one here. What are your thoughts on the ethical dilemmas of vaccines?
Mm.
Example, some vaccines consist of aborted fetal cells. Do vaccines go against the will of God, and should Christians refrain from vaccinating themselves and their children?
Okay, so let's talk about vaccines in general, and then we'll, of course, talk about the COVID vaccine in particular, because I'm sure that this is what's prompting the question, though maybe not. Regardless, so glad to have you asking this. A lot of people are really up in arms about this and turmoil about this, having crises of faith over this, using religious exemptions both reasonably and also as an excuse to what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So the common objection to vaccines is that it uses a fetal stem cell line that may have come from aborted fetal tissue. Now, with the COVID vaccine in particular, there's two fetal stem cell lines that it comes from. One is, and let me pull it up here just because I need to remember it. It's HEK 293 is the main one, as far as I remember. And I believe there's another one that's used by, I don't know if it's by Moderna or if it's by Johnson & Johnson. I'm not sure. But there's a second that I've heard that's used out there as well. We really need a bioethicist on this show and a medical doctor to go as deep into this answer as I would like. This is not my area of expertise. What I can share with you is a couple of particulars that I have read as I've wrestled with this myself, but then more importantly, frame it against a broader ethical question or ethical way of navigating these types of things that we find. From what I have read, not just the COVID vaccines as they're rolling out today, but any number of medications that we use have benefited or used at some point the HEK 293 stem cell line. Now, let me clear up what I've read to be a myth about the stem cell line, but also what a stem cell line is. Basically, a stem cell line is a family tree, meaning, to put this bluntly, when they're making the COVID vaccine, they are not taking aborted fetal tissue and putting it in a blender with whatever else they put it in to make the actual vaccine you're getting. What they are doing is taking cells that are inherited from cells, that have been taken from cells, that have been taken from cells, that have been taken from cells in a great grandfather sort of family tree that goes back, depending on which stem cell line, anywhere from 38 to 46 years. And that original stem cell may have been taken from aborted fetal tissue. There's some debate on that, and I've read both things. I've read some that say it has been, or it is very likely that it was taken from aborted fetal tissue. And I've read others that it's speculative whether it was taken from voluntarily aborted fetal tissue, or possibly from aborted fetal tissue that was done in the case of a mother's life, or even a miscarriage, or something of sorts. I don't know enough about it to go there, but I have seen you will get different people waving different flags and arguing different things, and that's where we really need the bioethicists and doctors on this show to help us out. But let's just assume for a moment that it is taken from aborted fetal tissue cells. It's still 46 years of generational stem cell reproduction happening all the way back there. Now, I can't speak for everyone. There are crises of conscience in this. And I've spoken to many Christians who really go, no, I can't do vaccines or this vaccine because I'm leery of this. And it's opened up their eyes to how it's used in other vaccines and creating dilemma there. But they go, well, we don't see COVID as serious as maybe polio. So, if I'm strong and healthy, maybe not this, but not that. I've seen other Christians go, I got the shot. I didn't go into it with a clear conscience, but weighing other issues, I just decided it was the right way to go. And I think there needs to be some charity on both sides of this debate. And I think the more that we can practice open debate and charity and discussion without politically polarizing it, the healthier it will be in the body of Christ, maybe as salt and light in the conversation, as opposed to getting fueled into the political agendas that each side might have. Yeah. Where I want to frame it, though, Andrew, is into something called formal and material evil. And these are the categories I'd like our listeners to kind of hear now. All of us at some level participate at some degree or extension in evil in this world. There is no getting around this. But Christian ethicists and philosophers and theologians have made a delineation between what they call formal evil and material evil. Here's what it means, and here's how it applies to this discussion. Formal evil is taking a direct part in some kind of evil. Material evil is having an indirect and arguably even unintended role in some kind of evil. So let me give you an example. Participating in formal evil would be going and buying a gun and giving it to your friend who you know wants to murder someone, right? You have played a direct part and a knowing part participating in that evil, not to mention maybe even just buying the gun and pulling the trigger yourself, right? This would be an example of material evil. You are you own a metal smelting company, and you take iron ore and other materials and alloys, and you just make these and you sell them on the open market. And some of these alloys happen to be bought by gun manufacturers, who then make them into guns, who sell their guns on the open market. And then those guns are purchased by many law-abiding citizens, by those who are looking for self-defense, by those who enjoy to hunt, but also by those who might in turn buy that gun and then go shoot someone and kill them in a, shall we say, illegal or evil sort of way. That would be the difference between formal evil and material evil. Another example that I've heard commonly put is, are you the doctor who is performing the abortion? Or are you a scalpel salesman, and it happens to be bought by hospitals who use the tool that you've sold to perform an abortion? There is no excuse for participating in the former. Christian theologians have come down consistently and said, you are never allowed by God. You have to resist formal evil, no matter what the price and at all costs. But when it comes to material evil, it comes down to a matter of conscience. And that just doesn't mean do what I feel like doing or what's expedient. But you really need to wrestle with God with that based on any number of factors that may play in. But the end answer to that is there is allowance to material evil at some level. Otherwise, you just can't function in this world. And I can give you biblical reasons why this is propagated and how different churches have come down on different sides, and different theologians over the eras have come down on different, kinds of things. But, this is a similar struggle that people have with just like investments. You put your money in a 401k, and that 401k is diversified by a funds manager that you never met. And if it's done by like an index fund, even at that, it's just being put broadly across 5,000 stocks or 3,000 stocks or the Fortune 500 or whatever it might happen to be. And maybe some of those Fortune 500s hold subsidiary companies that don't do things that you would actually agree in. Or maybe you don't even do that. Maybe you open a checking account, and that bank lends to companies that you might have a less than savory view of, right? That would be material evil. Does that mean you don't open a checking account? No, but maybe it does mean that you wisely look at the bank that you're investing in for more than just the interest rate it can give you or the fees that it waives to some of the ethical things as well. And so that's how I think the vaccine debate really has to be approached, because it really isn't a case of formal evil. It's a case, arguably, of material evil. And it's at that level that I think each individual needs to kind of wrestle through their level of participation. What I would encourage, though, of our Christian audience is I have not had the vaccine. So I'll show my cards, and I can talk about why. But I've met a lot of people who have come to me going, I'm looking for a religious exemption. But the reason they're looking for a religious exemption is not because they actually have a religious crisis of conscience over the vaccine. They just don't want to get it and don't want to be forced to and don't want to have to. Well, I get that. If you don't want to get it and don't want to be forced to and don't want to have to, and you think for certain policy reasons it's wrong to, that's fine. but object on those reasons and don't hide behind the religious exemption, because that's ultimately dishonest, even if it's making life more expedient for you.
I think that answers it.
All right.
I think that is good.
All right. Was that feisty enough for you, Steve?
It was very
Did
feisty.
that feel good?
You know,
All right.
your
All right.
feistiness wore me out.
Okay. Did I get
Actually,
tired here?
I'm crashing from my
Yes.
sugar high.
You got to pop some more of those, Steve.
I do.
Yeah.
These are, by the way, Reese's, because we're looking for more sponsors. So Reese's, I need you.
Mini peanut butter
Now-
cups.
Now, did you just
Moderna,
participate in
Pfizer.
material evil because of the way that Reese's propagates obesity and diabetes in this world?
Everything in moderation.
Okay.
So
okay.
I can have a Reese's
Okay.
and not get to
So
203.
will you get a vaccine in moderation, get one shot but not two?
No, will not. You want me to show my cards too?
That's great. When you said formal versus material evil, I pictured a tuxedo. It was a different type of formal.
It's very strange terminology, isn't it? Yeah. And honestly, we can get into why that terminology has been adopted and standardized and things like that. I'm giving those terms because if you look this stuff up in, even in Google searches, but, theology textbooks, the way that people write about it, this is the terminology that they'll use. And it is helpful at some level to just learn the categories and the lingo of those who are kind of discussing this stuff beyond the pop level.
Well, and one of the things that, wherever you go, you go so far into the webs, let's call it, that you'll see, well, this is the mark of the beast. So what do you say to that?
There's a lot of conspiracy theory
Yeah.
around this. I find like every 10 years, the mark of the beast is attributed to something else. I know one of the latest conspiracy theories going around with the vaccine is that they're going to put a dye in it, and that dye is going to appear under ultraviolet if they go over there, and maybe a code number. And, conspiracy theories are fun, and they work because they tap into our uncertainty, our fears, and the what if possibilities that truly could exist someday with technology. It's science fiction, right?
Yeah.
I love science fiction. I love fantasy.
And at some point, science fiction could become reality with technological advances, but it doesn't mean that it was true at the time.
And I can tell you this most assuredly, that when John penned the book of Revelation, and he wrote Revelation chapter 13, and he was talking about the mark of the beast, he wasn't talking about this.
Yes.
All right? He's talking about something more transcendent. He's talking likewise about something far more contextualized to his culture and the culture that the Christians were in the 90s AD. Just like I grew up in the 80s as a kid, and I remember back then. Do you remember this, Kent? Steve, you may remember some of this too. But Gorbachev,
Oh, yeah.
because back then,
The
Russia
birthmark.
was Gog and Magog, and all these prophecies from Ezekiel and Daniel were applied to the Soviet Union at the time. And of course, you have Gorbachev, who has the big red birthmark on his head. That was the mark of the beast when I was growing up. And I remember being a 10-year-old kid, hearing people at my church and hearing people talk about this. And, what is it? What can it be? Look,
A birthmark.
you're just doing more harm than good. It's
just
in
biology.
propagating this kind of stuff.
So could
And,
you summarize the material and formal into intent?
I think intent plays a large role in it, but it's got to be more than intent. It's also the proximity of participation. Is my participation direct or distant? Now, intent is a part of it, Steve, so absolutely I'm not taking that off, because to sit there and be a mob boss and have other people do your dirty work, even though you might be a step removed, is still participation, right? Or intentional participation.
Mhm.
But yeah, that does play a large role, and I think it can be a helpful filter to figure it out as well.
Of course, you're listening to 21.6 The Net right here. This is questions you never thought you can ask in church. And the best thing is you can ask those questions any time of day, 24/7, 815-314-0363. Whenever the question hits you, just go ahead, text that in,
You got it. You
and
got
we
it.
will address it on one of the shows. It is just that great.
Or right now?
Or right now. Absolutely.
It's true.
Yeah.
And also, while we're talking about that, I am getting so close to getting the podcast sorted out.
Yeah. Share with us the podcast lament here, Andrew. Give us the 60-second on it.
essentially we were having problems with some of the episodes and recordings going out to the different Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, those types of things. And they weren't playing nicely, shall we say, because sometimes they'd show up on one platform and not another one. And I'm like, I have no reason why they are or aren't. So finally...
I have a theory.
You have a theory?
Yeah, I have a theory.
Is this a conspiracy theory?
Yes, it is. The theory is that we've become so competitive with Joe Rogan that he's sabotaging us.
That is true. We're waiting for that Spotify exclusive deal to kick in.
It's going to have to be like a in-the-ring wrestle match with Joe Rogan.
Hey, look at Steve in Fantasy World, right?
Yeah. Even all three of us together would not be able to do that.
I want to talk about feisty. You're wrestling Martin Luther and now Joe Rogan.
True.
I mean, this guy.
It's going to be good.
Gotta get the octagon at FOF. You know?
Three bald guys.
Anger in there.
Three bald guys in a ring. I'll just pit those two.
I think that's the name of a show there, you know? Yeah.
But no, so I've been able to move all of the episodes to a new platform, and some of the existing podcasts haven't recognized that yet. So it's a weird way of saying it's on some of the platforms, but not on all of them.
So be patient with us, guys, out there. Past episodes are in process of being uploaded through these providers who are trying to figure things out on their end.
They said sometimes it can take up to a month for it to update. So nothing like
hang in there.
speediness.
Hang in there.
But
in the meantime, catch us on Facebook if you want past ones. You just have to look at 12:30 to 1:30 every Wednesday afternoon Central Time.
Yeah, and if you do go to fellowshipoffaith.org and to our FOF Plus page, there's a Spotify link there where you can play all of the episodes. So that one is up to date. That has everything from all the way back to 2018, I think.
All right.
Well, thanks for the update on that. While you're looking for the next one, today is a very significant day for me. Just wanted to share this with you. And this is not a joke. This is not funny, although I'm smiling.
Yeah, you are. A little bit. Yeah, we never know to trust you on this.
I know you don't. No, today it marks the anniversary of me baptizing my granddaughter.
Hey, 1 year?
2 years.
2 years.
2 years.
I remember that.
2019. Because we had just moved here.
What's her
August,
name again?
Bexley.
All right, so happy baptism birthday to Bexley out there. 2 years old already.
I know.
It's craziness, man.
And another one on the way.
Yeah.
April 4th. It's a boy, little boy.
You know, my mom.
I hope I can say that.
Actually, every year wishes me a happy baptism birthday.
Mm-hmm.
I've done this with my kids. I haven't known other people to do it. And I used to kind of at first, it was always kind of cool, but just, whatever. And it's I've come to really appreciate that, to be honest. And there is something really cool about that.
Yeah.
So,
and this was super special to me because, we went back to Nebraska to our old church and whatnot. The pastor ended up, being sick on that day. I don't know. And so then the guest pastor, which, Ryan Mathias, Pastor Ryan Mathias?
I don't know.
Great guy. He's out in Seward, or at least he was at that point.
He's the campus pastor at Concordia, Nebraska.
Super good guy. We've been friends for a while, but he's like, Steve, why don't you do the baptism today? I'm like,
that's cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So
even having that moment to kind of walk into it and just, that's wild, man. That's
cool
awesome
stuff. So anyway, happy anniversary, your baptism today.
Maybe Andrew could baptize your second grandchild. It's on the way.
I'm hoping that they travel here.
Yeah, that would be cool.
To bring the whole caravan of people to Illinois. And it'd be cool to see that whole caravan coming down I-80.
Yeah.
All of our old...
I'm picturing 300 cars.
I
don't think it would be that many
congregation.
people.
No, we're going to send out a whole invite to our old congregation.
Okay.
So come on back.
That'd be fun to do.
It would.
Yeah.
Take a road trip. Come visit us.
Yeah.
Next question here. Did the flood really happen, or is it just a narrative to depict the disobedience by mankind toward God? The pain and hurt it causes him when we do, and his need to judge and discipline our actions.
Good question, and people have interpreted it both ways. People who love the Bible and hold it deeply and sincerely. I personally believe it's a historic narrative. There's reasons for that. But I have brothers and sisters in Christ who come down on the other avenue of that. There are pieces of each camp can come up with its reasons and evidences as to why it might be the case. But I'm just going to put it out there to speak very openly about it, that it is a debated issue, but I personally believe it's historic. Yeah, great question. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. This kind of goes into creation as well. How come God lets his creation die, like animals or even us?
Yeah, doesn't it just stink?
Yeah.
Actually, it depends how you look at it.
Well, maybe not.
Because it's been argued that death may have been a blessing. According to the creation narrative that you'll find in the Bible in Genesis 1-3, as well as the way it's alluded to and talked about and built upon in other places, God never intended death to be a part of the human equation. Death is the result of sin. Death is a result of the corruption that's come into the world because of sin. God by nature is life. And where God is, you find life. And when you're in communion with God and close to God and in, shall we say, the orbit of God, if you will, life is abundant. But sin separates us from God. And so it automatically separates us from the things that emanate from God, mainly life, which means death. Death is given by God as a consequence of sin. And so at one level, you can say death is, the reason God allows it is because it's a judgment by God. And I mean judgment in the very neutral sense here. It's a decision God made as a result of sin. At one level, you can argue that there's punishment in this. And I certainly can see that biblical trajectory that happens. At another level, you can also see it as a decision by God for the betterment of his creation to spare them from the propagation of degradation, decay, and wickedness. Can you imagine if you continued to decay both morally and physically, but couldn't die? I've stood by the bedsides of many people who have gone, I am worn out. When is the Lord just going to take me home? At some level, death is the enemy. At another level, death is nothing to be feared if you're a Christian. Because as 1 Corinthians 15 will put it, the last enemy to destroy will be death, when God will renew creation, meaning remove the decay and degradation and corruption, if you will, that becomes a part of the human existence as we know it, and therefore death as well. So, how's that?
I think that
We're all
covers
with that one,
it. Yeah, I think so.
All right. Want me to get more feisty on it?
Nah.
Okay.
Want to wrestle?
Okay, want to wrestle?
You want to
Steve's
wrestle?
ready. Steve's ready.
You say wrestle or
what,
wrestle?
we have
Wrestle.
8 minutes left.
Yeah, what do we got
minutes
here in the
left.
inbox? Yeah.
So this is a longer question, but I'm going to split it up into parts.
Okay.
How come no one ever talks about Matthew 17:27?
How come nobody ever talks about Matthew 17:27? And what we are going to do is we are going to read Matthew 17:27 for all those listening. Here it is in the NIV. But so that you may not cause offense, go to the lake and throw out your line. Take the first fish you catch, open its mouth, and you will find a 4-drachma coin. Take it and give it to them for my tax and for yours. You talk about that one much, Steve?
I see it on billboards.
You see it on billboards all the time. All the time.
Imagine that's on bumper stickers and people just have no idea what it. Like, why that verse?
Honestly, I think John 3:16, when it's on a billboard, people have no idea what it's about and what's going on a billboard either. It's a story about the temple tax. And this is within Judaism of the day, where Jews were required to pay a tax as part of supporting the temple complex and the structure and the religious establishment and things like that. So what happens here is religious leaders come and they go to Peter, Jesus' disciple, and they go, how come Jesus isn't paying the temple tax? And Jesus goes, well, yeah, he does. And then Peter goes, well, Jesus, do you? And I'm just going to read this here. He says, when Peter came to the house, Jesus was the first to speak. Why do you think, Simon, he asked, from the kings of the earth, why do you think that they collect duties and taxes from their own children? Or from whom do you think they collect it? From their own children or from others? And Peter says, from others. Then the children are exempt, Jesus says, right? Which implies this, because Jesus is all about parables, going, hey, who's here before you? Well, Jesus, right? Who am I? He's saying, I'm the king. This temple is my house, right? I rule this turf. And if it's his house, he's actually claiming to be Yahweh. Because all the temple is the house of Yahweh, right? This is my house, right? Or it's my dad's house. if I can be a little bit more specific there, right? Since when do kings tax their own children for their realm? No, this is my kingdom. But he goes, but so that we don't cause offense, pay the tax anyway. But here's how we're going to pay the tax. Go fishing. You're going to find a coin that's going to appear in this fish. You're going to take it out of that fish, just so you know that the way this is done and how the whole creation is in my hand. It's such a cool story, right?
Yeah.
You know, I don't know why people don't talk about this story more, because it's pretty cool. I will tell you this. It appears in every church lectionary. So a lectionary is an organized systems of readings that a church will go through every year or 3 years. These go all the way back to the 2nd century. They actually go back into Judaism, even before that. And the point of a lectionary is to kind of cover a broad gamut of stories in the Bible, making sure they don't get missed just because this particular church likes to talk about this topic all the time, or likes this preacher's kind of hung up on this kind of thing. It keeps you in the whole counsel of God, so to speak. So it is talked about a lot in the lectionaries. It comes up as a reading. And I got to throw this one back. Maybe you're just not going to church enough, and maybe you're missing it when it comes up in the 3-year cycle. Or maybe when it comes up in the 3-year cycle, your local church isn't actually reading it because they want to talk about something else and they cut it out for time, or the guy preaches on something else. So that happens too. But it is talked about in this way. Christians really are called not to give offense, even when they have the right to. There are many things as children of the kingdom, and because of the freedom that we have in Christ, we don't have to do. But I see this one quoted more where Paul will say this, you know, I'm free to eat meat. But if I'm among people to whom eating meat causes offense, this is Romans chapter 14, then I'll never eat meat again, right? Because I will sacrifice my own freedoms and rights for the sake of the conscience, faith, and out of love for someone who's struggling in some kind of way. Man, that's hard kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's brutally hard kind of stuff when it comes about sacrificing your own rights or freedoms so as not to cause offense to someone else. And well, we all love to talk about our freedoms and rights far more than we like to talk about sacrificial love. Yeah, I don't like that. But that's the way of Christ.
Free will. We were just, Maya and I, just taking her to school this morning, and she wanted to pick out the playlist for the drive. So she picks out Cradles by Suburban. I don't know if you don't know the song, go listen to it. It's really good. Part of it is the when you listen to it, you think of like if someone is directing your moves, like a robot or Pinocchio, let's say. So a puppeteer. And so then we got to discussing free will on the ride to school. Like, how weird would our lives be if God didn't give us free will? It would look very different. Puppets, basically. So free will, I think, should be our next show. Let's discuss
You like
it.
the free will topic.
I really do.
Yeah.
I really do.
Steve likes to drop the free will bomb.
We could
just
delve into it forever. If you need a movie to watch, I think it's Ryan Reynolds has a new one called Free Guy, which is based in free will and AI and those types of things. I thought it was
and
good.
in this case where we have the freedom, right, in Christ to do many things, that we shouldn't use that freedom either A, to indulge the sinful nature, or B, to insist on our rights over love for other people. And 1 Corinthians is chock full of advice on that, not to mention other places.
That free will is a tightrope. You know, you walk it but really contradicts itself at the same time. You know, if it is a tightrope and you have that free will and you can choose to go one way or the other, you really got to walk that narrow road. I don't know if I'm making any sense.
I have no idea what you're saying.
Steve
in my mind,
No,
come on. Think about it. You're on a tightrope, right? Or a very narrow road, right? You're on that road because you've chosen to be on that road, but you can choose to do good, or you can choose to not do good.
Yeah.
But doing good or bad, you still fall off the tightrope?
No. Okay, the tightrope's bad. Meaning
Steve,
it's difficult to walk on.
Actually walk a tightrope. I want to see you walk a tightrope, and I want to see you in the Oompa Loompa overalls.
With
Let's
Joe
say it's a
Rogan.
wrestling
With Joe Rogan.
On
and
your
Martin
back.
Luther.
You're
In
carrying
heaven.
It's a wrestling
That
match.
will be... we'll wrestle on a tightrope.
Well, we're getting the 30-second warning here from Kent today, so hopefully next time let's pick up and and talk about that more. And maybe Steve will bring us a picture that we can put up on Facebook
I will.
here
I will.
and see him both in his 203 Oompa Loompa days, but also this week, Steve. Our challenge to you is to try walking a tightrope. Okay, we want to see that. We want video.
You know,
We want
someone
footage.
gave me a, what do you call it, a zip line one time. We first
Yeah,
moved here, and
yeah, I know.
some
It's-
guy gave me a zip line.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Still,
I
in
mean,
my,
it just- it-
still in
it-
my garage, sitting in the Tupperware.
It just says
that
love
came
all
in.
over it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Here, take my trash.
Well, guys, thank you for listening today. This is Questions You Never Thought You Could Ask in Church. If we did not get to your question today, it's in our inbox. We will get to it, and you can text them in at any time to 815-314-0363. Again, 24/7, not just when the show is live. You can text them into 815-314-0363. We will get them. We will get to them as soon as we can. Thank you so much for listening, whether you're on 216 The Net, whether you're listening through podcast and recording, whether you're joining at Facebook. We are live every Wednesday from 12:30 to 1:30 Central Time. Signing out. God bless. Keep asking questions.
Questions you never thought you could have. Questions you never thought you could have. Questions you never thought